the student come into my office and he's like, we got to do ASMR. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So we YouTube some ASMR videos and I said, we're absolutely not doing an ASMR experiment. This seems ridiculous, but something I teach my students all the time is to have an open mind, to have a curious mind and explore, and know is never the full answer, maybe just not right now or not in that way or something like that, some adaptation of that. So I did a little bit of research about ASMR, and we did do a study that was super interesting, and I totally thought we could have done something to publish what we found, but somebody beat us to it, that it's tied to, if you get goosebumps when you listen to music, it's tied to the same neurological phenomenon as that.
You just heard Joshua Woods from Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa. Garth interviewed Josh for episode 204 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
Hi folks, this is Garth, and I want to tell you about an Intro Psych book from Sumo Learning. That's SOOMO. The book is called Psychology in the Real World by author Jennifer Harper. Sumo and Harper have taken seriously the APA-IPI recommendation that scientific inquiry and research methods should be the foundation for all content areas. So they built research spotlight activities into every chapter with focus on identifying and evaluating scientific claims, which is the applied stuff that we all want our students to be able to do coming out of this course. It's got LMS integration and auto-grading and supplements like slides and test questions and notes, and it's affordable at only $50. So check it out. Go to sumolearning.com, that's SOOMO learning.com, and get a preview of psychology in the real world.
The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
Well, folks, I am on the road here. I am in Des Moines, Iowa. When I had the opportunity to go to Des Moines, and my friend Josh here is going to laugh at me, but when I had the opportunity to go to Des Moines, I thought, I have never been to Des Moines. I've always been interested to go to that area. And so when we were going to do a meeting and he said, we could just do it in Chicago. I said, no, let's do it in Des Moines. I want to come to Des Moines. So I am here in Des Moines, Iowa. It's the summer of 2024, and I am with Joshua Woods. Josh is an associate professor of psychology at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa. Josh, did I get anything wrong there?
Nope, that's spot on.
Perfect. Okay, well, I rolled in here last night. Thanks for hosting, by the way, and it was really nice to meet your family yesterday.
Yeah, they really enjoyed meeting you too.
That's the right answer. And I hear there's a bonfire in our future.
There is, and so you only met one of my daughters, and you're going to come to my life where there's 4 women in my life.
Yeah, that's
with my other 2 ladies.
That's great.
Yes.
That's great.
So my littlest and middle and oldest and wife.
Perfect. Yeah. So we should tell people what we're doing, because I just think it's good.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just ask you, what do you think we're doing here together?
The shortest answer is we've got a lot of work to do for the Coast to Coast conference, so let's just get some work done. But I think a more true answer is we are 2 people with the same mission in mind and love for what we do, and we really want to figure out how to do that well.
Yeah. Yeah, and if folks don't know, the Intro Psych Coast to Coast conference started during the pandemic, and Psych 1 and TIP Northwest, both Intro Psych conferences, came together and thought, what could we do? Well, people aren't meeting. Could we produce this virtual conference that is very accessible, $25 to register and join us for a day on a Friday in January, and just get some professional development? And how did you I can't remember. How did you come to be on this? Probably through Bridget, right? On this committee?
Yeah, Bridget brought me on to Psych 1.
Yeah.
And because of my location, and I told her, again, because of my other world, my wife's dance studio, I said, I don't know that I'll always be able to make it to the conference. Her and I were having some conversations of what my role could be. And I said to her, I was like, I do have this idea of, it seems like because there are people like me in the middle of the country that can never make it out to, it's so ironic, to the coast or to Nighttop,
Right.
to all of these places. It's so hard with my developmental resources that, I wonder if there's a way to just project Psych 1 online or something or make it accessible. And she's like, well, actually, I was just talking to somebody about this. Let me put you together with Garth.
That's great. Yeah. By the way, I like how you framed that Bridget just found you out of thin air that to join the Psych 1 committee. I think that was, now when she did that, I think it was an application process, right?
Yes.
Okay. And had you been out to Psych 1 before?
No.
Okay.
I have no idea why she.
So you were impressive on paper, sir.
No, maybe I don't know. I think there was a why are you interested in joining? And I've never asked her, but the only reason I can imagine that she plucked me out of the application is maybe what I wrote there, because I do feel very strongly about intro psych, and I do feel very strongly about psychology in general and teaching in general. So.
Yeah. So do you remember specifically what you wrote, or was it just like love for those things, love for intro psych? And
well, I think it's something that we all say, that it's sometimes our one shot to talk to people that are going to become accountants or nurses. And I think that the more I've gotten to know Bridget, that I understand that's just not something that she says. It's something that she just understands down to her bones. Mm-hmm. And I must have communicated that in a way that she understood that I feel that very deeply too, that is a very heavy burden to carry, that we should not take these psych classes lightly. And it's not just a burden, and it is a wonderful, beautiful opportunity to do some real good in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel the same way. You have been such a gift to us for Intro Psych Coast to Coast, by the way. And I know that you've been very, very, very helpful for Psych 1 as well. But one of the things that we're doing right now is that, when Bridget and I decided to start Coast to Coast, I didn't know what the future would hold, but it was wildly successful. And now, sponsors have got on board, and we've been able to bring in big names. I'll try to list them. Your one was Dave Myers, and then I think it was
Carol
Dweck, and then it was Gene Twangy. Mm-hmm. Can we announce this yet? I think we can, right?
Should,
yeah,
yes.
I think so. Angela Duckworth will be with us in January 2025.
So excited!
Yeah, this is it's pretty cool. So we're doing, but then it's also. It's been successful, right? We've had hundreds of people showing up for it. And now we're thinking about what do we want to do to further support all these people? And so that's what you and I are doing right now, is we're kind of building out Coast to Coast. All this to say, Josh is now, what do we call you? The incoming director for Coast to Coast. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. So Josh is the director of Coast to Coast. We've registered as a business. We're a nonprofit now. We are going to support and stay affiliated with TIP Northwest and Psych 1. We just figured that we're all doing the same thing. Let's just, I feel like, is conglomerate the right word? I don't know, some sort of relationship between these places or these institutions that have this same heart, right? Mm-hmm. For teachers, to help teachers, to develop teachers of intro psych, to get this message out.
Yes, that are not competing against each other, but finding every way possible to help and enhance, the mission.
And I don't know, man, what do you feel like is the difference between a face-to-face conference? Mm-hmm. Because TIP, as far as I know, TIP and Psych 1 are not going to go virtual anytime soon. But what is different in your mind about a virtual conference, particularly one that doesn't have a lot of overhead, right? Mm-hmm. And so that $25 that people are sending in, there are expenses, but after the expenses, there's a lot of upside to not having overhead. What do you think?
Yes. I think this is maybe just a philosophy of life that there are pros and cons to all sorts of different opportunities, right? And so I feel like Psych 1 that I just got back from and was able to have face-to-face conversations with some of our keynotes there is invaluable. And that's something just incredible. And then just even now that I've been there twice, 2 years in a row, there are people that come back and you're like, hey, I remember you from last year. Nice to see you again, And there is that connection that's really unique to those face-to-face conferences. And I think that's a wonderful pro. Sometimes they can be a challenge for an online format. However,
we know you want to reach every student in your course to help every student individually succeed. But how do you find out what each student wants and needs? Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology offers a solution. Ask them. Achieve puts goal setting and reflection surveys in each course, where students share their aspirations, thoughts, and concerns about what they are trying to learn. Their responses help you tailor lessons and assignments and addresses both individual and class-wide needs. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
I feel like, one of the reasons why we're able to get so many people and also some big names is because it is so easily accessible to, again, me being in Iowa, there's no way that I can just afford to go out year after year to these conferences and, and get that enriching experience. And not only is it, I have 3 kids,
Yeah.
How do you do this while you're trying to, teach a 4-4 load and then usually plus an overload on top of that? And I know my experience is not, it's not rare. It's a common experience where you're juggling many things at the same time. And so Intro Psych Coast to Coast has this wonderful opportunity that none of the other conferences can do. And again, that's not to take away from them, but you can do this from your phone in your living room.
Yeah.
You can do this from your office. You just close your doors, just mark out a small spot. You can do it, out in a park and you were listening to, Carol Dweck talk, blow your mind. You think you know growth mindset? I thought I knew growth mindset, and I even read more about it, and then she still blew my mind. You know what I mean? I'm like, wait, Carol, you struggle with growth mindset yourself?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I got goosebumps listening to her,
Right.
And how many other opportunities do you get to do that? Where you get an opportunity. And then, where there's questions being put up in the feed that then you and Bridget have been able to manage and really, sometimes take themes of the same question and then throw them back to Carol that then we can process together. I mean, it's even though the mission of Psych 1 and TIP are the same as Intro Psych Coast to Coast, there is pros and cons and there are benefits. I mean, if we could all do it all, that would be wonderful. But
right.
I think like you said, it's $25. It's so simple. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
You can hop in and hop off
Yeah.
and nobody's going to even notice,
There's recordings of it, right?
And we are working very hard to figure out how to enhance those smaller group conversations, which I think we're all, very cognizant of good ways of doing that. And so we're, that's something that we're going to continue to work on.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's some real benefits to each area.
Well, one of the things that we're going to do, first of all, we're handing it off to Josh because he's very capable. I mean, he's got the organizational skills I dream about in my sleep, because you need somebody who is going to be able to responsibly kind of manage this whole thing, because I actually think it has great potential to grow. And some of the things we're talking about is how does Coast to Coast become not a Friday in January service to people, but how does it become a year-round? What can we do? How can we dream? How can we build this and become a year-round thing? So Bridget and Janet Peters and I are not going anywhere, but we need to be freed up to do what we're doing outside of Coast to Coast. And so Josh is going to step in and capably kind of take this thing over. So it's going to be fun. We've got the next, 24 hours or 30 hours to dream about this and what it's going to be, and then we're going to start building it. When you start a nonprofit, you got to do things or start a business. A nonprofit is like bylaws. You've already been looking at those, right, and putting those together. So yeah, there's a lot that we're going to do, but like great movements start with a simple idea. And today is sort of a day one of that idea, right?
Yes, so, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the things that Josh does. I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the last few years. And it's always funny when I'm hanging out with someone. I don't know how many times I said to you yesterday, I said, we need to stop talking right now. I was like, we got to save it for the podcast. Don't tell me about your background right now. So we successfully met for a couple of hours yesterday without talking about you at all.
That's kind of true. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Good thing your family was there too, so I could chat with them. But Josh, we're in, let's start here. Tell us about the room that we're in right now.
Yeah, so this is my research lab that we call the Psych Lab to the university, but internally and then actually outside the university, we call it the Cognition Lab, where we've used LEAK, the language LEAK, to spell cognition because my background is memory research, false memory research to be specific. I wear 1,000 different hats. I'm actually, after this week, I'm going to be writing a report for a expert witness for a eyewitness trial that I'll be an expert witness for. So we do memory research on false memory, but my students have told me that those experiments are sometimes super boring. And so they made me step outside my box when I first, opened up this lab. And we've tried out all sorts of different things, things I would never have thought. I will never forget the conversation of the student coming to my office and he's like, we got to do ASMR. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So we YouTube some ASMR videos and I said, we're absolutely not doing an ASMR experiment. This seems ridiculous, but something I teach my students all the time is to have an open mind, to have a curious mind and explore and know is never the full answer, maybe just not right now or not in that way or something like that, some adaptation of that. So I did a little bit of research about ASMR and we did do a study that was super interesting and I totally thought we could have done something to publish what we found, but somebody beat us to it, that it's tied to, if you get goosebumps when you listen to music, it's tied to the same neurological phenomenon as that. And so that was just something, and when I was reading, I was like, hey, I wonder if it's tied to that. We did a study, confirmed that, and I was like, we should write this up. And then continue our literature review, we realized that we should do that.
ASMR stands for?
Oh, gosh. Autosensory meridian response.
Okay.
So,
and can you explain what that is?
Okay. So it's, if you go to YouTube.
No, I know. I realize there's many videos and sounds, right?
In fact, there was a beer commercial that did it where it's somebody whispering.
Oh, yeah.
And they do like taps.
Yeah.
And it's, for some people, it gives this autosensory meridian response where they get like the hairs on the back of their head stand up. They might get goosebumps, but it's this feeling of, well, if you've ever had goosebumps when you listen to music, it's very similar to that. Some people, it freaks them out. They don't like it at all. And some people, they have no response to it at all. That's me. And so this falls on a continuum. And again, this is not my background. I don't know. So if I'm not saying this accurately, and our idea was in our own experiment are people who are more likely to experience that, I think it's called musical frisson, and I may be getting that wrong, but that the goosebumps when you listen to music, also more likely to experience that ASMR response. And we absolutely found that. Somebody else had just found that. They were quicker to publish it because, again, this is not an R1 institution, and so our research moves at a much slower pace.
Okay, so that's interesting. So do you get into kind of what's going on in the brain with those connections, with that connection, or is it? Like, if you would have published, what conclusion would you all have drawn about it? Just that people seem to express the same sorts of physiological response to like this music and then also these sounds?
Yeah, so our research was just correlational data at that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I actually have an EEG machine, but I am not an EEG machine expert. But we have talked about picking it back up. Again, the challenge, though, of my teaching load mixed with trying to run this lab is by the time I get students to figure out how to run the EEG machine with me, with my very limited skills, they've graduated and they move on.
Yeah, right.
You know, so it's there was this perpetual cycle of I just can't get over a certain hump.
Well, yeah, and research is not a huge part of what you are compensated to do, right?
Zero compensation.
Oh, okay. So that's very kind of you to do this with students.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a part of my contract at all.
Interesting. Okay, but now let's just wonder for a bit. And you might know, but what do you know? Is there an emotion behind what people are experiencing? You think? Or
so that's the interesting thing about the reason why this has become a phenomenon. And again, apparently, this is with my limited research and the little bit of literature review that I did. People who experience depression and anxiety feel a reduction of their symptoms when they have ASMR experiences. So they will either, whether that's a part of their daily, tool belt of coping skills, or oftentimes they'll use it to fall asleep because that's a relaxation technique, which is weird because, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but what's weird is then people who have a very high response to so my brother, all the time. He's like, dude, you got to listen to this song. We'll play a song for me. And he's like, see, look at my goosebumps. He is a musical goosebump person, right? And it seems like those people that have that really high level of it, it's almost like the ASMR is too much. That response is a little bit too much. So again, I don't know where that sweet spot is, but it does seem to have some therapeutic benefits, according to some people.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, this reminds me of how cool psychology is because in this, I mean, if I was testing next steps on this, it would be, let's look at emotions. Let's look at, there's a sensory experience. There's like baseline experience. There's personality probably in there. There's, like all of these things in this one expression of, do you respond or how do you respond to this sound of tapping or whatever it is. And I'm sure there are people out there exploiting it too for money. I always think about that.
It's so true.
The therapist that I see right now, he's a developmental psychologist. He mostly works with kids, which is interesting. I see him for maintenance, but I was talking to him. He's one of his professors. Let me get this right. With Solomon Asch.
Really?
Yeah, and he said that he kind of got Asch later into his career, and so Asch wasn't talking at all about conformity with his students. And they were like, why don't you do this work anymore? And he was turned off because New York started using it, like New York City started using his research to make money, basically marketing, right?
Wow. Right.
Yeah. And so he just did not like that idea. So speaking of pros and cons, I mean, when we do find truths out about human behavior and thought processes, it can be used for I wouldn't say evil, but it could be used for good, and it could be used for something other than, the good of people. In some ways, manipulation and, making money, whatever. I don't know if that's good or bad. It just is what it is.
Well, actually, that's, again, back to the whole intentional approach that we have to take with Intro Psych Coast to Coast is we can either do a lot of really, really good, or we might be doing some really bad. Like, now you know how to diagnose people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you have a little bit of knowledge. Yeah. Or now you should diagnose yourself. Or, now you shouldn't, like you said, you're seeing a therapist and, for maintenance, and that we can normalize that. And that's so wonderful. But then, people just get sometimes a little bit of knowledge, and then they're like, maybe I don't need to see a therapist because I'm not that sick. And
that's right.
It's that Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And so we have a real challenge with, how to keep them on the rails.
Oh, that's a really good point. Like, because I think about the content problem. And I'm going to call it a problem.
Yes.
I think it's actually beyond a challenge for most intros. And anybody who teaches intro psych knows that content is a problem, not a challenge. Yes. There's just so much. Like, it's like, what am I going to do with it? Our high school teaching colleagues, for better or worse, they have to get through all the content if they're teaching like an AP course or whatever. So I'll talk about people who have a little more freedom than that, but we all have to get to the point where it's like, what will I talk about? And like, what am I going to share with my students? I don't know, Josh, that I ever thought about the fact that if you don't give people enough depth about a topic, that you've kind of set them up for that Dunning-Kruger effect a little bit, right? Where you give them a little bit but you don't teach them like all the nuance and all the critical thinking with it. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Oh, well, I 1,000% agree. I mean, I think it's unique to psychology. I don't mean maybe exclusive to psychology, but definitely unique. I mean, I think if you take a basic chemistry class and you don't get the nuances and all the technicality, you're probably going to be fine, right? But psychology is about who you are as a person. It's about who you are in your family. It's about the family that you're going to raise or choose not to raise. Yeah. Who you are at your work. Who you are in your religious faith of life or not. It is about every aspect of a human. And so it's a very unique challenge that we have to face. And so I'm reminded of something that I know that you've said before that Dave Meyer said is if there was one thing that we need them to know, and sometimes I'm like, maybe we need to boil this down to there's just these 5 things and then we can create the content around that. And I don't know if that's the right way around this, but you're right. It's not a challenge. There's a fundamental problem that we have. Yeah. But that means that there's a solution. Right?
That's right. Yeah, no, I think there is. And those things might be, and the IPI put out themes, right? And people have been teaching with themes forever, even pre-IPI, but maybe that's one way to get through the challenge, the problem. But okay, let's just do a little thought exercise here. What are the things that if you didn't teach students kind of all of the nuance of it, what are topics in Intro Psych? And we haven't pre-planned this, so this is on the spot. That could be problematic for students if they just ran with it. Let me think about that.
I mean, I think the therapy one's the easy go-to.
That's easy.
But go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I in my graduate work, I studied attachment. So I actually have my students do an attachment questionnaire and reflect on their attachment style or how they score on that or whatever. It's a continuum actually, but it's actually 2 continuums. But and I guess that's what I'm saying is that simply if they just look at one of the 4 categories and they say, I am avoidant attachment, that's dangerous, right?
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah.
But you need to teach, I mean, how powerful of a tool is it for all of us when we learned about these attachment styles and putting language to stuff, to our experiences of life. And so that is the challenge / problem. And this is part where I'm not sure if it's a challenge or a problem, but where, we want to give them the seeds and we want to give them, so, I don't know what the answer is, but I remember when I learned about attachment, I'm like, oh, this helps me understand my dad versus my mom.
Interesting.
And it then helped me then after that, and maybe this is true for other people, where then you think about, oh, there's grandma and grandpa on my dad's side and grandma and grandpa on my mom's side. And oh my gosh, are those attachment styles? And then it immediately went to, okay, now what kind of attachment style, what kind of a parent, what kind of a home do I want to have? And I remember that thought as I'm riding on a bus after I left an intro psych class at Iowa State University. You know what I mean? I remember sitting on the bus thinking through all of that stuff. And so if we don't introduce that stuff, then you're never going to sort of break that in. And so it's a catch-22. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know
what the genogram is?
I don't.
Okay. In counseling psychology, specifically family systems, the genogram is a bit of a family tree.
Oh, cool.
But it has its own language that is based on, like, you can look at it, it's very symbolic. So it's like, if there was, when you said, like, parents, grandparents, and those kinds of things, I'm already starting to imagine this family tree. But you can also... there are like symbols for this person was incarcerated or there was conflict between these 2 people. And you start to pattern all that stuff visually and you can see things pop out like patterns that you wouldn't necessarily see. So, cool. Yeah, so we were trained in this in my counseling. This is the first time I've ever talked about it actually because I just started thinking about it. I was teaching abnormal this year. hey, we just changed it, by the way, to psychological disorders. So that's great step forward for us. So forgive me. But and I started thinking about like the benefit of something like that for students to see that. Now, you know, when I was trained in it, it was like to be used in a kind of sort of a counseling setting. And, but yes, again, now I'm like down a rabbit trail, but yes, these are things that can really enhance people's understanding and their futures, where they think about, what do I want? Okay, so what other? Let's get a couple more.
So I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so because I see this in my class, so racism, right? And again, intro psych is hard because how much time do you have for social psych or racism specifically? You can talk about discrimination and prejudices more generally, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I think due to some conversations in Black Lives Matter movement and people having very strong, there's clear symbology. If you see a student with a BLM patch on their bag, or a student and this is very notorious around my campus, where they'd say Blue Lives Matter, you can almost assume that they ideologically disagree with each other, right? Yep. They come into my classroom, we have a conversation about racism, and I ask my students, do you know how to define racism? So I collect their definitions of racism, and then we try to have conversations using those definitions, and they cannot define it. It's really hard to define. And so everybody's walking around with this knowledge, this sort of, I already got this, I know what prejudice is, and yet you can't have a Black Lives Matter and a Blue Lives Matter person talk to each other, even though they are both certain about the way that they define racism. So then when they watch something like, I won't use George Floyd because I feel like maybe that's maybe a little bit different. Although I don't know, but maybe something, more like, oh my gosh, his name just left my, Eric Gardner, right?
Yep.
So Eric Gardner, you have them watch that video, they're going to see somebody resisting arrest. One person might, Blue Lives Matter person perhaps, Black Lives Matter person, that he's not resisting, he's hurt, and he's asking, like, get off me, And so it's two people with the same stimuli, and their experience of it is completely different because of their definitions, their operational definitions that they've developed, although they don't call it that in their head.
Yeah.
So then, like, if we're just sort of brushing over these topics, like we can sort of do damage by validating, oh yeah, you know what racism is because I gave you a general definition, and now you're good and you're fine to go out in the world and continue your misunderstanding of this. Or we cannot, cover it at all because it's complicated and it's scary, and so oftentimes people just sort of skim over it. And so it's one of those, again, where it's really hard. How much depth do I go in here, and how much time do I have to cover?
It's interesting to think about textbook definitions of things, even psychological definitions, or operationally defining things even, and then how a student experience is so different still, even after they've read it. I love the idea, by the way. Do you do this with racism? Do you actually have students kind of you said you have them give all their definitions, and then work through it?
It's fascinating.
I actually like that as a better starting place than starting maybe with textbook definition. I'm sure you can do it either way, right? But I like that. You're seeing what you're dealing with. You're kind of learning about your audience, and then you're able to kind of correct misconceptions, or it's a good one. So
what's another one?
So no. Let's think about another one. Oh, we haven't. So okay, research.
Yeah,
I think there's some in research that
for sure.
Even correlation. Okay, let's do this one. Correlation is not causation. I bet you every intro psych student can say that.
Yes.
I bet you 10% of students can explain it like a year after, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really actually complex.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great point. Again, and that kind of connects back to what I was saying about racism, or just this general idea where you've armed them with a little bit of information, and now I have this certainty that I know how to tell the difference. I know how to read about vaccines. I know how to understand correlations. And so you can use your correlation is not causation when you see a correlation that you disagree with, but then use it to be like, gun laws versus no gun laws. And see, now I've validated my point, even though I've learned correlation is not causation, and so you're right, that little bit of information. But of course, isn't it wonderful that every intro psych student knows that correlation is not causation, because that's important, right?
It is important. I think that, we'd love to say that our students even get correlation and what that means, but correlation is statistical, right? Like it's complicated. It's because I think when my students learn about it, they tend to think about like that correlation is like what percentage of something is caused by something else, right? Because it's 0 to 100.
Yes.
And so I think that's the temptation.
Yes.
So you have to work really hard to help them understand that that's not exactly what it is. So yes, it's nice that they say the words, but if we don't get into it, and here's the thing, we can't get into all of it, right? Mm-hmm. All these things. So we have to pick and choose. I think you said a few minutes ago, I know we don't have the time in intro to cover racism like it needs to be covered. And I would just say to you that lots of us actually do. Mm. If we have freedom in how we teach the Intro Psych course, then you do. If that's your value, then you can make that the one thing that students are going to walk away from. And you can talk about, be responsible, make sure that you are, giving the whole course, whatever you need to, like reaching your outcomes or whatever for the course. But if you want to make racism the theme of your course, it actually is kind of based on one of the themes for the IPI, right? So it can be the thing.
Well, and this is just specific to my course, and I may be doing this completely wrong. So, take it for what it is, but I do dedicate a lot more time to racism than I think other people do. I spend like almost 2 weeks. Now, it's not full 2 weeks just of racism, because it's a build into it after we're talking about other aspects in social psychology that build into it, all things about conformity and other social pressures. But so then probably a full, 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, hour-long class dedicated just to racism. But then I end it by saying, by the way, this is not just about racism. If you understand this, you're going to understand a lot of things about humanity. You're going to understand a lot of things about psychology. Again, the reason why psychology always points back to the Holocaust is because it's not just about the Holocaust. It was a crazy, awful, terrible, the worst example of our worst natures in humanity, but also some of the best examples of some of our best natures in humanity that Viktor Frankl wrote about. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's this conundrum that you find in racism as well. That if you understand racism, this is maybe just my perspective, you understand all sorts of other, you can understand any other inequality. Yeah. You can, whether that's about sexuality, and gender, whether that's about religious and faith, whatever that is, but that's just one step away from it. What you're really understanding is you're understanding there is no difference between whether it is me or somebody in Papua New Guinea. There is different cultures, different social pressures, but there is something that makes us human that is inside all of us, and that is a truth, and that is a goal of psychology to understand that. Not Western white people, which has been the mission for so long, whether intentional or not, and there's a debate about that, but regardless, we're trying to understand the human experience. Yeah. And I feel like that is buried in the conversation about racism.
Yeah. When you're talking, I'm thinking about, and this is not my area at all, but I feel like I'm looking under the hood of a car and being like, how does this thing run? And really understanding. And that's what you're getting at, is like, these are little glimpses into getting under the hood and thinking about, how do humans run? How does this brain work? And you're right. I think something like a topic in psychology and really getting deep into it can tell us a whole lot about, for a skilled teacher. And that's why Intro Psych is so hard, because this is a skill. For you to talk about racism and then to start to attach all these other areas of psychology into that, I imagine you can do it well because of your experience and also because of your background. You're a cognitive psychologist, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm sure that, you would do that proficiently compared to somebody who doesn't maybe have that background or expertise or something like that.
Well, that's an interesting, so I'm constantly thinking about how to redesign my Intro Psych class. And so, again, getting back to that idea, what did Dave Meyer say is the number one, or what is the top 5, and not to just point back at him, but just, his advice I think really matters. But then I wonder if there is space to say, because we're all on a continuum of skilled, teaching, and so I wonder if there is a space to say, I'm going to do these 5 things or 3 things or 10 things. I don't know what that number is. But then there's this thing that I really see how this is so important. Maybe it's personality theory. Maybe it's maybe it's the biopsychology. I love, there was a debate at Psych 1 between 2 people, and I won't get into the details of it, of whether or not you need to talk about the sodium ion channel. You know what I mean? In the brain.
So let me guess, because I don't know. Sue Franz said you don't, and somebody else had a different opinion?
Yes, okay. Absolutely, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was, but all in good, kindness, fun. But the reason, and Sue said this, she said that you should go do that. Actually, you should go.
Good.
I'm not going to though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's, this is hard, but we also need to come at it from a place of no shame. That there's not just a right way, but there are much better ways.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of conversations we need to have. So if you need to talk about the sodium ion pump, because you're going to be able to connect this to, I mean, I don't want to rehash that whole conversation, but the short version of it is as this person is talking to Sue, she's saying, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this channel right now, talking about how it is everything that you, Josh, and Garth are doing right now comes down to that. And isn't that amazing? Yeah. So she could probably teach about that with so much more passion than Sue could, or even, anybody else.
It's such a great reminder. Regan Gurung and I we're right now putting together our first, it's called the Intro Psych Academy. And we are taking IPI recommendations. And the big problem was that people have these things that you're articulating, which is like, I feel like I'm not doing it right. Oh, it's just the wrong conversation to have. It's not a right or wrong. There is, even with recommendations from the APA for what you should do, and should is like in quotes, I guess, but it's not prescriptive. What we have to do, and you and I, we've actually had this conversation already. Authenticity is maybe one of the most powerful teaching tools we have. And if that person gets goosebumps by talking about that topic, that person should talk about that topic, because I bet you it'll be memorable for students, right? And it sounds like maybe they're skilled in it, and it sounds like maybe Sue kicked the hornet's nest, because people do. They are. Somebody's area is biopsych, and they figured out that that's the secret sauce to making this exciting for their students, right? So anyway, it's a good reminder. Yeah. So obviously for you, and probably because of what you studied, some things are really like passion topics for you, right? And that's how you attach intro psych to them. So yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts about that before I kind of move us along?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go here because, by the way, that was a great conversation.
Yes,
I really enjoyed it.
This is really fun.
Yeah. I mean, and folks, these are the kinds of conversations that you get to have at conferences. So if there is a local, regional, teaching conference, if you can make it out to Tip Northwest or Psych 1 or whatever, or stay tuned for what Coast to Coast is going to do, because this is what we hope these are the kind of conversations that we want people to be having, nationwide, worldwide, about psychology. So, okay. So, Josh, I have learned a few things about you since I've been here. And one is that you are Des Moines through and through.
Oh, I am, yeah.
You were born here?
Yes.
And you live here now?
I live here now,
And you found a job teaching here? Okay.
Yeah, Grandma and Grandpa are here,
I mean, you have deep roots here.
Yes.
How far back do those go?
Well, I'm born, lived here, went to high school, went to Ames. So that's just 30 miles north of Des Moines. I went to Iowa State University for my bachelor's. But then it's funny that you say that, because I had every dream and hope and idea that I was going to get out of Iowa and never come back. So I went to grad school in England, and through that process, and that's, again, of course, a very long story, realized I really want to raise my kids around Grandma and Grandpa. And so, I love Des Moines. It is, I didn't grow up loving Des Moines. I thought it was too small, and, it's in the middle of the country. Yeah. And it's just, I'm really grateful that I get to live here, and both sets of grandparents are here. And so it's just a really great place
to my God. To be so many listeners like me. And probably, I think in maybe higher education, a lot of people don't live close to their families. I think it's rare. Yes. I imagine, right? Just because of the nature of our jobs, right? Like, it's not like I'm an accountant. I could have stayed home in my home city if I was an accountant, right? But sometimes you have to travel to get the job you want. So I'm interested to hear that story from you. Now going back, is kind of Iowa like multi-generations back for your family? Like, were great-grandparents here too in the area?
So I actually just learned this maybe a week or two ago, that on my dad's side, the guy who came from Prussia moved right here to Des Moines. And so that's like 3 generations. It's his great-grandfather's former great-great-grand. He'd be my great-great-grandfather. And ironically, so you came to the dance studio last night.
Yeah.
And so there is the oldest sort of Des Moines cemetery is called Woodland Cemetery, which is right where we were at, right near that street, just one street up. And he's buried there. And I didn't know that until 2 weeks ago.
No way.
And so maybe this is a little creepy, but my wife she loves history.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when, we've been working at the studio and there's something going on and we just, we have like a 30-minute break, we'll go and walk around that cemetery to look at the names and, we'll talk about, I wonder what their life was like, or, and so I've probably walked right because I don't know, we've done countless walks. So yes, is
there a headstone for him?
Yeah, I need to go look it up, but I just found it out a couple weeks ago. So you haven't been there to see? No, I haven't, because we were out of town.
Well, we ought to go find it.
I know, it's
sacred, so I don't want to impose.
Apparently, no. You would not be imposing at all. No. You can look it up online. I think it'll actually tell you the location of it.
Wow. And by the way, if people aren't tracking, your wife owns a dance studio in the area, and you spend a lot of time there building sets.
Yes. Yeah. You got to walk by where I was like, oh no.
Building walls.
Every wall in that building I put up there.
Yeah. And I got to walk through it yesterday, and I probably saw 40 kids there. They're having a summer camp, but this is like a major part of your life, right?
Yes.
Because as academics, that work is just one area, but your family seems to thrive all together doing this thing. It's crazy to talk to you in the May, June time, because you guys are ramping up for your end of year sort of dance. What is it?
Dance recitals.
Yeah. So you've taken meetings backstage,
yes.
Which is hilarious.
It's very integrated, but actually integrated in a good way, because I feel like it's made me a different kind of a teacher too, because I show my kids dances in class. And I've only ever shown one of my wife's own, because I feel like there's a bit of a conflict of interest, but she did a piece that was she had somebody on Fiverr record the monologue that's in the Barbie movie, the beautiful monologue that I think is really the heart of that entire movie. It's called Impossible. And so she did a dance to it, and it has just won first place at every regional and national competition that we've been to. And so it's just been this stellar. So I was like, all right, guys, I've never shown one of my wife's own dances, but you really want to understand this gender conversation. This is an artistic way of understanding it, a visual, auditory, mixed with music way of understanding it. And so, or in my sports psychology class, there's another class that I teach. They probably hear far more about dance than they care to, which apparently the dancers, they love, because they're like, everybody talks about football, or wrestling, because we got a really great football and wrestling program here.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for throwing some dance in there.
Yeah, that's really, really cool.
So it informs my teaching, actually.
Again, I'm hearing this theme that's coming up in our conversation, that who you are as an instructor matters. What you do outside and what your interests are, or what you do as a family can be really impactful in the classroom, especially as we let students in a little bit to what makes us tick and our authenticity. And and you spend more time with your family than your students, right? So that's going to be a big piece of what you're bringing in. Okay, so great backstory. Prussia, by just personal interest, why did they leave? Do you know why they left?
I don't know, but there is a scandal that I don't fully understand.
Oh,
is what my dad was telling. But so there does actually sound like there might be an interesting story there. And it has to do with maybe being married to somebody and leaving that person and coming to be with another person here or something.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know, but it was a short conversation I had with my dad.
Yeah, I asked because when my family immigrated to Canada, it was under Stalin, and so they left for religious purposes. They fled because it was pretty brutal.
Yes, that's common.
Yeah, and then Canada, they were basically given land to farm, and that's kind of how they came out, right? So anyway, let's talk about you grow up here. Were you a good student? Were you good at school?
Oh no!
It's
really funny for me to bump into anybody from high school where they're like, "You're a professor? Did you have to lie to them? Is this like some sort of big con that you've pulled?" No, I hated school. The only reason why I went to an undergraduate degree, the only reason why I went to college was because my parents didn't get the opportunity to, and they were adamant that my brother and I would. My dad was the first person in his very large family to ever graduate high school. And the only one. And so he was adamant that my brother and I were going to go to college and we were going to finish. So I went to college, bombed my first 2 years because I didn't know why I was there. I was there because what mom and dad told me to go. And I hated school. I thought I hated learning. That wasn't right at all. I love learning. I think everybody does, actually. It's just how we learn,
Yeah. What turned things around for you?
Well, my grades got so bad after my sophomore year, I had to decide that I was either going to drop out or get busy. It's actually kind of funny. I do some orientations, and I'll put I put up my undergraduate transcripts because it's like, I got some B's in there, okay? But it was C's, D's, and F's. In fact, there's several F's because I kept failing the library course that's just supposed to be the easy 1-credit pass course. And I kept failing it because it's funny, we were talking about conscientiousness. Apparently I did not have any of that back then,
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and so my GPA was so bad that I had to make a decision. And then it's funny, there is this summer, and I think I just needed to decide what I wanted to do. And it's it's probably like a 2-hour conversation. What I tell the students in my 20-minute conversation is I found my why. Like, why are you here? Do you know why you're doing what you're doing? And I found my why, and that's a long conversation, but I became really interested in what is the meaning of life, and is there a scientific way to understand that? And psychology, oh my gosh, I didn't know that that's what psychology was. I thought psychology was therapy. I didn't know that has any connection to that at all. And so that was a very short version of my why. And then my transcripts, it's all A's after that. There is one B+, but that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But it's straight A's
Sounds
after that.
like a bad teacher to me.
He started the class by saying, I've been teaching for 30 years and I've never given an A. And I'm like, challenge accepted. I was stupid to accept that because he gave me a B+. I was like, I'm going to be the one person who gives an A. I'm going to do everything I can. Guy gave me a B+.
Whatever, man.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I didn't take his warning seriously. I should have.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's stupid. They're just letters.
Okay. So, and you took your first psychology class as a junior, or had you already been in a psychology class?
Well, I was undeclared when I came. And I took my first psychology class, Psych 101, I think maybe the second semester of my freshman year, and then took one more somewhere in my sophomore year, maybe 2 more. And then I was like, maybe I'll declare psychology as a major. So I think towards the end of my sophomore year, I declared psychology as a major. And that's when I started taking more psychology classes. But you said you started out as an accounting?
Business.
Business, sorry. Yeah, as a business major, right?
Yeah.
And, I checked out the business classes and I was like, this seems awful.
Yeah.
Not to hate on any business majors, just personally for me.
Yeah.
And I tried a bunch of different majors that I thought would be good.
Now I would have gone back. Like I would do an MBA now.
Yeah.
If I was interested in going back to school, I would do an MBA because I find it fascinating. I find the marketing, the communication stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Like so fascinating. It's such an intersection with psychology as well.
It is straight. All of it is psychology.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So you get your undergraduate degree in psychology. You got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and what's the process between that and grad school? How did you find
that
England?
I wanted to go to? How did I find England? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
What school did you go to?
Lancaster University. It's in the northwest region of England. So I got busy and I'm like, I am sort of desperate. Nobody's going to want to take my transcripts. I know, even the averaging of my GPA, even with straight A's, there's no way I'm going to get into a good school. But I was raised with some wonderful parents that were just like, you just keep fighting. You just always, dream big, you never give up. And so I applied to 5 different schools. The reason why I applied to Lancaster, is the only school in England I applied to, was because I was working in a memory research lab, which is part of the reason why I developed the lab here. Because working in a lab was transformative for me professionally, academically.
When did you start in the lab? As a sophomore? Junior?
It was that like junior year, and I came to Dr. Ann Cleary, who's a professor in Colorado State University, maybe Boulder. I'm probably going to get that wrong, but I was like, I know my transcripts. Like, you should not let me into your lab. I completely understand, but because of the incredible human being she is, she's like, that's fine. I completely understand, and she gave me a shot, and I kind of became her lead in a sense. And so I'm always looking for those students, and I find them all the time here at Grandview. I think we all have those students, and maybe not the messed up as big as I did, but maybe I call them, it's maybe a shout out to Aladdin, but a diamond in the rough, right? Just somebody they don't realize the value that they have themselves. It's my favorite thing in the world to put a mirror up to their face and help them understand that, you know?
Yeah.
So she kind of did that for me, which is why my lab. So I was working in her lab, reading research articles on memory because that's what her area was, and it was a growing interest of mine. My Nana was dying of Alzheimer's at that time, so that was a personal interest as well. And I kept reading this guy's work. His name's Steve Dewhurst, and I just loved the way that he wrote. I loved the way he approached research. I thought he was a really good writer. So I emailed him, and I tell my students this all the time. These are just people. I never expected an email back, so we kind of started a conversation. So I applied to 5 schools and got into Lancaster, and I never thought I'd get into it. It's a really good school. They never should have let me in, just like Dr. Cleary should never have let me in her lab, but,
And where does Steve work?
Well, he's at Whole University now, but he was at Lancaster for years.
Was. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to close that loop. So you knew him, and then you applied there.
Well, I kind of...
Or you emailed him?
I emailed him and just asked him some questions about his research, and so we, kind of hit it off. But it was still very much I knew that I was trying to maybe make this connection in case I could apply. And I genuinely never thought I'd get in. I was sort of this weird, what's the... in my family, we call them BHAG goals, big, hairy, audacious goals. It's just a silly thing. It's not silly. You should take it seriously, but it's, what would be the big dream?
Yeah.
Go to England for grad school. And then I had more realistic ones, that were, well, I had one other one that was a big dream one, but the other 3 of the 5 were much more realistic, much more practical. And I got into Lancaster, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your experience there like?
Oh my gosh. Life-changing. I can't tell people enough to get out of your bubble and go explore other bubbles, which I think you are a walking, living experience of that. But very uncomfortable at first. We moved there, my wife and I, with 5 bags. We'd sold everything. We were renting out a 4-bedroom house, but we had furniture to fill that 4-bedroom house for the most part. We sold everything, had 5 bags, moved there. And because they speak the language... and because, you might think the only real big differences is the money, maybe, some phrases like, that they call it a lift rather than an elevator, that there shouldn't be any culture shock. So that was my expectation because that's what I heard. And that was not the truth at all. There was a massive culture shock, but I think it's because I wasn't expecting it, And so, but it was amazing. And, the uncomfortableness wasn't amazing in the moment, but through the process and my dad said to me when I was at the airport getting ready to leave, he said, because he was a Marine in Vietnam and has been stationed all over the world and also as a world traveler just by nature. He said to me in the airport, he's like, you are going to learn things that will be very, very important to your future in the classroom. I understand that, but I promise you the things you're going to learn that are the most impactful are going to be outside of the classroom. So go explore. It was hard because we were poor, but we did try to go out and explore and just meet other people and do things outside our comfort zone. And I can't tell people enough that you need to do that at some point in your life.
Yeah. It's such, I moved overseas when I was, 19 as well.
Oh, really?
And had a similar experience.
Where'd you move to?
New Zealand.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you want to I would love to hear that story.
Well, I know we have a hard out in a few minutes, and so I want to stick with you. I think I told that story in my podcast episode when Eric interviewed me years ago, but I'll tell you over lunch anyway.
Okay.
So you get your PhD there.
Yes.
And what happened? Like, what are you thinking? At that point, do you know you want to teach? Is that the goal?
I thought I wanted to do just teaching and not do any research whatsoever. And I think it's because I went to a teaching conference once, And they said, it was a group of like 70 people in a room. And I was sitting right up at the front, brand new teacher. So I'm like, I'm going to be that, first person in the front row or whatever. And they said, how many of you never had a teacher that like ever lit you up, has never had that experience at all? Sort of the backwards of the question where everybody raises their hand. And we're like, this is one is, and I was sitting there and I raised my hand and I like looked around and realized I was the only one that was raising my hand. Like I never had a teacher that inspired me, which just sounds awful to say. And that probably speaks more to me as a student than it does to the teachers that I had along the way. I had many teachers that I think did some good teaching along the way. But it seems like everybody has this story. I did not get into teaching to emulate that. I got into teaching because the stuff that I was learning, I was like, people need to know this stuff. Why don't they know this? Like, I need to help them understand this. And so there's nothing wrong with being a teacher for those reasons, because I think that really matters. And I've been told by some of my students, I've been that teacher for them, which I'm very grateful for, but that's not my mission. My mission is there are really important ideas. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I realized I needed to marry research with my teaching to do that well for my teaching style. I don't think that's true for all teachers, but I think I'm constantly wanting to be on the cutting edge of knowing what this stuff is, and especially for social cognition, which is where my research has really taken me, is I feel like the way we think about it, the unconscious and conscious ways that we try to think about how all of our interactions is just, I don't know, it's mind-blowing. It's miraculous. It's so wonderful.
Well, it makes sense now why you would start a lab that is not part of your workload, and put time into it and work with students. And we're surrounded by posters here. You take your students to MPA. I mean, this is not something that is required of you, and yet you do it. Mm-hmm. And here's what I love. I think you do it for you as much as you do it for your students, but I think that's what is life-changing for students, is when they are watching somebody who loves what they do. Lots of us came from families where we watched parents go to work because they had to go to work and make money, not because you could get compensated for something you love. Like it's such a privileged position to be in. Like it's such a gift, But now your students get to like see somebody it's intrinsic motivation, right?
Absolutely.
That's what you tapped into. And now your students have observed it and say, like, I want more of that in my life, or whatever it is. So
yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope to, maybe this is true of all teachers, but you find your passion and you try to impart some of that and be like, look, the story of they don't want to do a lot of memory experiments. We do. This is the boring one. This is about the factors that increase the details. It's about the illusory recollection and the differences between the remember, know, guess paradigm using the DRM procedure, right? They don't want to do that. I want to do that. I find that stuff super fascinating. What they want to do is they want to see this MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, and the implicit association test, and how that can also lead to differences in criminal sentencing in an experimental fashion, which has not actually been done. And we didn't do it perfectly, which is why it's a poster, not a paper yet, but it's a project that we're continuing to make better. Yeah. That's really interesting. Or gender differences, or, all of the different things that are around the lab.
Well, it sounds like you enlist your students' ideas in kind of creating these research projects, which is also says something to who you are and what you do. So how long have you been at Grandview now? And what was the process of getting that job?
Yeah. So I just celebrated my 10th year. I got my 10-year jacket, which is actually really nice. I'm really excited. I got it in the spring, so I can't wait to wear it.
You get a jacket?
Well, it's a Columbia pullover fleece, but it's nice.
I think I get like a pin or something. Yeah, all right.
I was actually kind
of... Come on, Cascadia, do better. Yeah.
So I got a really nice Columbia. To be honest with you, I got this job with every intention of jumping off and then trying to go to a more research-based school, because again, I realized through grad school that I actually liked doing a little bit of research, but I knew I didn't maybe want to do an R1 institution, but maybe I could be happy there. And this maybe sounds, I'm hesitant to say this because I don't want it to be misunderstood, but I thought the stuff I really want to say, I want to say it to as many people as possible. So if I've got a classroom of 400 people, that's even more people I get to share this with. You know?
I like it.
So But the really cool thing is I've learned at a place like Grandview, used to because I only went to big schools. And so it terrified me when I got put in a classroom and they're like, yeah, the most you're going to have in a class is 15. Now, most of mine are actually 50. And that's a long story as to why that is. Some of that's my intention. Some of that's just the nature of the classes that I teach and the need of them. I've realized when it's more 15 or even 20, you can have different conversations. There's different opportunities.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn to adjust my teaching style to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah. Well, Josh, it has been great to get to know you. And I think, we will keep talking. It's just not going to be recorded, right? There's like lots of fascinating ways that we could go at this point. I want to wish you all the best with Coast to Coast, with your, you're on a sabbatical, first sabbatical?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, starting in the fall.
Okay, just one semester?
One semester.
One semester.
Yeah.
I hope that is just like life-giving for you. You seem like you're energized anyway, but I'm sure it's going to be, a really nice time for you. And then, as you take over this Coast to Coast thing, I'm really looking forward to what happens next. So thank you for sharing your story with us and your expertise. And I think people probably really found this helpful, these conversations, specifically your insights about Intro Psych were really, really inspiring to me as well. So anyway, thank you so much. And let's go talk about a conference.
I love it. Thanks, Garth.
Psych Sessions can do what it does because of listeners like you. We want to thank you for your support over the years in our mission to get more free professional development to all teachers of psychology around the world. If you want to support us further by making a tax-deductible donation, please head to psychsessions.org/donations. Thanks for listening.